Welcome back to Sunday Night Dinners with Deborah. So today we're going to be making meatloaf. Meatloaf? Not your mother's meatloaf. This one's actually delicious. I've worked in a lot of restaurants and every single one of them had a meatloaf recipe. And I tell you, I took a little bit from here and a little bit from there and I developed this recipe. And this one tastes great. It slices up beautifully. I serve it with a creamy mushroom gravy. You could serve it with a spicy chili sauce. This one, you're going to actually want to serve for Sunday night dinner. So let's get started. So this meatloaf has a lot of flavor in it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to cut up some onion and carrot and saute that off. We're going to cut these up into about a 1/4 inch dice because we want them fairly small so that they get spread all through the meat mixture. And it goes a long way to flavoring the meatloaf. This is quite a large carrot, so I think I'm actually only going to do half of it. We're going to be using 2 pounds of ground beef, and you want to get about a 70-30. So that would be either a medium or a lean ground beef, depending on where you're located in the country and which country you're in. So about 70-30 is what you're looking for. And yes, half this carrot is going to make enough of the sauteed veg. Now, if you happen to want a little celery in there, you could pop a little bit of celery in there. Again, you want the same small dice. If you want peppers in there, you could definitely saute those up as well. Now I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of butter and 1 teaspoon of oil. Now the reason we use both is so that the butter doesn't burn as you're sauteing off the vegetables. And now we're going to pop it in at the same time. We don't have to wait for the butter to melt since the oil is already liquid. And I've got this on high. Once it starts to sizzle, we'll turn it down to a medium high. And so there. I have a little bit of butter on my spoon, so there. And now we just let that go. Now, in the meatloaf, we're going to have 2 cloves of garlic. But in my mushroom sauce that goes on top, I'm going to have 1 clove of garlic. I want to mince it all. I don't have a garlic press. I have a knife. So I just mince it up myself. But I'm not going to do it in 2 different batches. I'll just take 1/3 out and set it aside for the sauce when it's time to cook the sauce up. One little trick that works well is to grab just a few drops of oil. If it's a recipe that already has oil in it, and that oil just causes all the garlic to stop jumping off of your cutting board and just makes it a little easier and quicker to chop up. At a small bowl, take 1/3 of the garlic and set that aside, and the other bit will go into my meatloaf. We're starting to get a little bit of color on the onions and carrots. I had a jumper. I had another jumper. Okay. And you want to saute off this veg first because you want to give it a chance to cool down before you mix up your meatloaf. Because we're going to be adding eggs to the meatloaf and we don't want to scramble up the eggs and cook them before they're mixed into the meat. So that's about good. We're just golden there. And I'm going to turn my oven on to 350. I have my 2 pounds of ground beef. And now I'm adding in my sauteed vegetables. Garlic that we've chopped up, the 2 cloves, breadcrumbs. Now today I'm using panko breadcrumbs, or it could be Italian breadcrumbs or plain breadcrumbs. You use what you have on hand. I'm putting in 1 cup. Into the meatloaf itself, we're putting a 1/2 cup of ketchup. And I hear my George woofling away. 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Now, I only have 1 tablespoon left. I'm pretty sure. And shake it all out. Yes. Now I have 3/4 of a tablespoon. Now I want to get a complete tablespoon, so I'm going to add just the smallest amount of water to get the last of it out. So I added just, I don't know if you can see just how little, just a few drops of water in order to get the last amount of Worcestershire sauce that was coating the walls of the bottle in order to make up that tablespoon. Because you want to have that full flavor in there. So that's going to go on to my shopping list of what I need to pick up the next time I'm there. Greatest ingredients of all time. This is liquid smoke. You can find liquid smoke usually around up near the Tabasco. Today we're putting in 1 teaspoon. It's quite powerful, quite strong. It's just distilled smoke into a neutral alcohol. Now we are going to put in 2 eggs. Salt and pepper are next. You want 1 teaspoon of each. So before we start mixing up the meatloaf, we want to get our pan already set to go. Now, because we're mixing up our meatloaf, we don't have to stop, wash our hands, and then get our parchment paper out, our pan out, our Pam out. So what I've done here is it's just on top of a baking sheet. I have a piece of parchment just in case it spills over. I have a loaf pan, and then I have just cut a piece of parchment to fit. And you just fold over the edges. And that'll just help with lifting up the meatloaf at the end so that we can slice it easily. And again, we get our pan. I am a big believer in making things easy on yourself. It'll be easy to pop out of the pan that way. There's only one way to do this. Get in there with your hands. So you just want to mix it just until it's completely done. And then we pack the meat into our prepared pan. Perfect. This is the other secret for making a meatloaf that slices nicely. You have to really pack it in hard. So you push it all the way down, and like as you can see, I'm leaving fingerprints in here. And then you push down right at the edge with your finger, pushing it right down to the bottom. And it's okay, it's gonna bulge up in the center, but we'll take care of that after. You go around all the sides, because it's always the sides that are the hardest and tend to tear when you try and pull a meatloaf out. There. And now I go back to the center and just push it down. So now I know that the bottom of the pan is completely filled in. There's not going to be any gaps with air. So there, a nice full meatloaf. I take a piece of aluminum foil. Don't mind the dirty hands at the moment, but I'm not touching anything but this meatloaf. And then I put it back on the tray and I pop it in the oven. So the meatloaf is in the oven. The oven is set at 350 for 45 minutes. And then we're gonna take it out and we're gonna glaze it. But first, I'm gonna prep my sweet potatoes because we're serving with it a sweet potato mash with a side of lime broccoli. Maybe not lime broccoli. I have to check to see if I still have a lime or not. It might just be smoked salt. I've got about 1.5 pounds of sweet potatoes that I've peeled, and I just slice them about 1/2 inch thick because we're going to be just boiling them up and then mashing them. While we're waiting, we're going to make that glaze for the meatloaf so it's ready when we are. We take 1/4 cup of ketchup. You need 2 tablespoons of mustard, and just your generic ballpark mustard, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And you want to pack it into that spoon. And you just mix that up. It's a little sweet, it's a little tangy. It just provides a nice finish. So see? Now we're making, as I mentioned before, a creamy mushroom gravy. So I'm just gonna slice up my mushrooms. I wanna go into about a 1/4 inch slice because you want them to be significant enough. You don't want them to be almost shaved. And then we just set those aside because we will make our sauce when the glaze goes onto the meatloaf. It's been 45 minutes. We're going to check to see the temperature of the meatloaf. So I'm pulling back very carefully because it is very hot, our meatloaf. Now I have a thermometer. See that? There we go. Now I want it to reach 165 degrees, but I'm also going to show you how to test it if you don't have a thermometer. I take a skewer, big toothpick, and I skewer in the center. And we pull it out and then very gently press on the top. If the juices are bloody or if they're running clear. And they are running clear. And right now we're up to 155. It'll just take another moment to hit 165. And there we go. Now I'm taking my glaze and it's going all over the top. Spread that out all along the top. And it goes back in the oven for another 10 minutes at 350 it goes back in the oven. So while the glaze is cooking, I've got my sweet potatoes boiling away. I've got my broccoli cut. And I've just turned the heat on that. And now I'm turning it on the heat onto my saute pan. I'm going to be making our mushroom cream gravy. I take about 1.5 tablespoons of butter and melt that. And in go our mushrooms. And we just saute those, start sauteing them off. I have my 2 constant companions in the kitchen, my cat Fred and my dog Sunny. And once again, George is elsewhere. The mushrooms have started cooking, so I am going to add that 1 clove of garlic. And I'm turning the heat down to medium, because we want to cook the mushrooms, not necessarily brown them yet. Salt and pepper. Now we add 1 tablespoon of flour, sprinkled over top. And just when that flour is mixed in with the butter that the mushrooms are sauteed in, we're going to add 1 cup of beef broth to give just a little more flavor to it. We have better than bouillon beef flavoring, about 1/2 teaspoon. Just a small amount, but it gives a big flavor boost. You don't want to overdo it though, because then your sauce will be too salty. We just bring that up to a boil, stirring the whole time, because you want the flour to incorporate with the stock. We're going to check our sweet potatoes to see if they're soft. Almost ready to mash. And we'll turn that up on high now, just to bring it up to the boil. And now we add in 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. And we turn it down so that it can simmer for about 5 minutes. I've taken the meatloaf out. It's beautiful. I'm turning the stove up to broil. My pan sauce is bubbling away beautifully, and I'm going to turn it off. I'm just going to set this in the oven for about 3 to 4 minutes. My sauce is finished. Everything's coming together. Beautiful. I'm going to set this off of the heat so it doesn't reduce further. Now I'm going to drain my sweet potatoes. Checking on my glaze, because I don't want it to burn at this point. So we're mashing up the sweet potatoes just like a regular mashed potato. And we're adding in 2 tablespoons of butter Into the sweet potatoes, we're adding about a quarter cup, a very scant quarter cup of cream. Actually, I'm done with the masher. And I like to use a spatula to really mix it in. So, teaspoon of salt, half teaspoon of black pepper. Mix it up. And as always, so we've got our cream, butter, salt, pepper in there, and always we taste it. Perfect. So my last segment didn't film. My broccoli, I squeezed in half the lemon, or half the lime, and 2 pinches of smoked flake salt. Now our meatloaf is beautiful. We're just gonna wait another 2 more minutes to lift it out. So now we're gonna lift this up. See that? Oh my goodness. And I'm putting it over, I can't quite take you quite with me, onto a cutting board. And now we are gonna slice. Beautiful. Even hot, it slices perfectly. It slices even better once it's cold. And now we just, as they say, head to the plate. So there we have it. Not your mother's meatloaf with the creamy mushroom gravy, mashed sweet potatoes, and lime and smoked salt broccoli. Thank you for joining me on this rainy day, and see you again.